That's what I love. These panels are so good, and the questions, and you just don't want to stop hearing what is going on. So great panel. Thank you, you guys. So along with all of the changes in technology, attitudes, and culture, comes new taste in sport. How many people saw the emergence of mixed martial arts, or esports, cornhole, darts, or the addition to the 2024 Olympic program of breakdancing? Introducing new sports or increasing the popularity of events which have been under-promoted in the past is something which has drawn the attention of serious investors, both legal legacy and new media companies. So we're going to look at several expanding sports with Dr. Jack Caress, who is the director of this year's first LA Sports Summit. But also, he is a PhD from Claremont Graduate School in Economics, and for 13 years, a professor at Chapman University here in Southern California. He knows quite a bit about new sports, having been one of the pioneers of world-class big city triathlons in Cleveland, Brooklyn, and here in Los Angeles. Don't fool with this guy. He's a four-time finisher of the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii, as well as a member of the 1975 NCAA Golf Championship team at UCI, University of Irvine. So you're teed up now, Jack. It's all yours.
Yeah. Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and great to have you here. We have a very interesting group of coming from different perspectives for the next 40 to 50 minutes on emerging sports. As you've heard for the last day and a half, or I guess it's been about a day now, one of the reasons that we launched this summit was to talk about leading up to the 2028 Olympics. And one of the most interesting things, and Ann just talked about it, was what kind of sports will be potentially added to the Olympic Games. And as Ann talked about, I mean, we've got some, I have the list here. In Tokyo, we're going to be having surfing, sport climbing, skateboarding, karate, baseball and softball are coming back. And then in Paris, we've added breakdancing, we know that. Winter Olympics have been added women's mono bobsled. Tell me if I get these wrong, I think these are all right. Short track mixed team relay, so we got some new relay events. Ski jumping, mixed team event, freestyle big air, aerials, mixed team event, snowboard, cross mixed team event. So some hybrids of some already existing events. But we really don't know what's going to take place for 2028 yet. So one of the things we talked about is we've got 8 to 10 years till the Olympic Games. What kind of sports might we want to see in the Olympic Games? But that's not the primary focus of necessarily the panelists we've got. But there's some interest certainly in being in the Olympic Games, or they're already in the Olympic Games. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what sports we might see coming to fruition or there's on the docket. So let me introduce, we've got three panelists today. Gretchen Kittelberger is in the middle. We'll introduce her first. Gretchen's the founder and president of the International Functional Fitness Federation. She's also currently occupies a seat on the board of directors. She grew up in Rochester, New York, and was a gymnast all her life. She continued competing in gymnastics in college and received a full athletic scholarship for gymnastics to the University of Maryland. After graduating from Maryland and retiring from competitive gymnastics, Gretchen went on to attend law school at the University of Virginia. While in law school, she discovered CrossFit for the first time. She eventually started training and competing in CrossFit and functional fitness competitions, competing 4 times as an individual athlete at the CrossFit Games in 2011 to 2014, and winning the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Games Regional in 2014. After graduating from law school and passing the Virginia Bar. In 2012, Gretchen took a job as counsel for CrossFit Incorporated and worked there from 2012 till the beginning of 2016. In August 6, 2016, she got the crazy idea. She founded the International Functional Fitness Federation with the goal of creating the sports governance structure necessary to get into the Olympic Games. She also continues to practice as an attorney and train CrossFit for fun, as well as coach others. Gretchen is also a certified CrossFit Level 3 trainer. Let me introduce Gretchen Kittelberger. To her left, Paul Rabel. Paul is the professional lacrosse player and co-founder of the new Premier Lacrosse League, a new professional lacrosse league launched in October 2018 with 160 of the best players in the world and a major media rights deal with the NBC Sports Group. You heard Karen Brodkin talk a little bit about it earlier, as did Rebecca Lowe with the NBC and Endeavor connections. They're a part of both of those. Paul's lacrosse career began when his next door neighbor gave him his backup equipment to try out for a local rec team. Since then, he's done okay. Paul has gone on to influence the sport at every level, winning championships and MVPs twice in the NCAAs, multiple times in professional outdoor and indoor lacrosse, as well as becoming a two-time world lacrosse champion with Team USA. Let me introduce you to Paul Rabel. To my left, Nick Street, the VP of Global Integrated Marketing for Vans. Nick Street was appointed the VP of Global Integrated Marketing in 2016 and is responsible for leading global marketing initiatives across product, action sports, brand platforms, and communications. Street began his career with Vans in 2006 and has worked in 3 regional offices around the world, making Street a true global representative of the Vans brand. Let me introduce you to Nick Street. So, how many of you have done or do CrossFit in the audience? That was a few. Oh, we got the two, I didn't know that, the 2 panelists. How many of you either play lacrosse, or more importantly on the West Coast, how many of your kids play lacrosse?
This is great.
So not
exactly who I want to be talking to.
That's right. So, the reason I'm asking is I know that there's a lot of education that's going to go on. Now, skateboarding and surfing. How many of you have surfed in your life? Hopefully you live in California. Okay, how many surf now? Goes way down, okay. Skateboarding. How many you skateboard or your kids do or both? Okay, so that's the most dominant one. So, each of our panelists has a short video. We're going to start off with Gretchen, and what I told them is we want them, the presumption is that you don't know a whole lot about the sport that they're involved with. But we also want to there's an interesting cross-pollination and interesting issues facing all of them. Gretchen, if you could tee up to use Ann's term, tee up the video that we're going to be showing that you've given us.
Sure. Yeah, so most of you probably have not heard of the term functional fitness as a sport, but a lot of you have probably heard of CrossFit, the brand. So CrossFit Inc. and some of these other smaller private brands have really done a good job of growing their business models, which has really been to get people in the gym and use their fitness methodology to get healthier, be fitter, live better lives. And as a byproduct of their success, over the last decade, the sport of functional fitness has emerged. In recent years, it's kind of become clear that in order for the sport to reach its full potential, it really needed some unified, formal sports governance that put the athletes' rights first, that focused on longevity of the sport, and focused on the sport becoming legitimate in the eyes of the broader sporting community. So that is why the International Functional Fitness Federation was founded, and it's our goal to keep those principles in mind as we try to gain recognition for the sport from the the IOC, and ultimately our goal is to be included on the Olympic program in LA 2028. So if you have never seen the sport before, when you're watching functional fitness, it's kind of as if you're watching a race, right? A fitness race. So all the athletes are given a set amount of work to do, a set amount of repetitions of certain exercises. They all start at the same time and progress down the field of play, trying to do the work as fast as possible while meeting certain movement standard requirements. The person who does it the fastest wins that particular event. The premise of the sport is that the fittest athlete is not the one who's really good at one thing, but the one who can perform the best across a wide variety of tasks. So you'll see in our events that athletes have to show their capabilities in realms of endurance, strength, body weight movements, in more skilled areas, the ability to mix all those together and perform them quickly, and then tests of power, right? Ability to produce force across a really short period of time. So you'll see all those capabilities being tested. The sport really has its roots here in California. It started here. CrossFit Inc. is a California company, and the sport developed here. The CrossFit Games actually was here in Carson from 2010 to 2016. In the LA area alone, there are over 400 gyms that practice functional fitness. And from those roots in California, the sport has grown into a worldwide phenomenon. There are over 4 million people who participate in the sport worldwide. And so at the International Functional Fitness Federation, we currently have national federations in 31 countries with about 15 more in development. We are planning for our third World Championships, which will be in Malmo, Sweden this year, August 30th to September 1st. And we'll be launching our Masters World Championship this year in October, which will be in Australia. So the video just kind of shows a little bit, it's some footage from Worlds last year, which was in London, England. So it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what the sport is about. So we're here at the 2018 International Functional Fitness Federation World Championships in London, England. The sport is made up of 6 tests, and each test is a different capability that we're testing for the athletes. It's really important that we make sure that the sport is fair, has integrity, there are rules and standards, and that the athletes' rights are protected.
At the end of the day, it's a health benefit training that we're doing. We're just doing it at a competitive level.
I mean, one of the things that I've learned personally from doing this sport is that I can come away from it, and no matter what challenge I have outside in life, from the general day-to-day, even to my working world, I know I can complete it. So that's why I love doing it.
It's a cool sport, but it's also doable for everyone.
How we train is a fantastic way to train for the general population. So I think it is recognised by the government, more exposure, more people at grassroots level will get into it and get fantastic benefits, just like my mum and dad are getting.
So we're really trying to show people that this is a sport for everyone, while also using this event to highlight our elite athletes.
Gretchen, why don't you just call it CrossFit? Why does it have to be, could it be the CrossFit Federation?
No, we can't actually do that. So CrossFit is a trademark brand name. It's owned by CrossFit Inc. And so for Olympic purposes, a sport cannot be a trademark name. It can't be a brand. It has to be a generic term. So in the CrossFit community, it's kind of known that the general term to describe CrossFit is functional fitness. So that's why we've chosen that name to refer to the sport. So we are not associated with the brand, where governing bodies need to be independent and democratically run, whereas the CrossFit brand is owned and run by one person.
Okay. Let's go to the next video, and let's show the video for Paul's, that we brought for the Paul Rabel's lacrosse video next, and then Paul will give him a chance to talk about the Premier Lacrosse League following the video.
I've said this a bunch, but we're changing the game. Everything from the experience for the players, how the fans consume the sport, but how we're building this thing from the ground up. These are the best players in the world, and never before has the game been showcased to the masses for what we know it deserves. And the PLL is doing it. And I think for the generations to come, they'll see lacrosse on par with the other major sports leagues, and the impact that that has for you guys watching right now and the kids that are playing right now, I don't think we can really forecast. So it's an exciting time to be on the ground level and build this thing with all of these players.
So Paul, for those of us that we didn't have a whole lot of hands go up about lacrosse, where is the sport of lacrosse in the arc of its development and its popularity?
It's a great question. So lacrosse has been around for hundreds of years. It's a Native American game. It's the oldest team sport in North America. It has, over the last, I'd say, 3 decades or so, transformed, though, more into this Northeast Mid-Atlantic sport. And primarily, we've seen, over the last 3 decades, participants live in that Maryland tri-state area, up all the way through Boston. And more recently, over the last decade, we've seen the sport proliferate at the participation level, where there's now 2.2 million US participants. And then there's 6 million fans, according to the SFIA report that just was delivered for 2018. So what we looked at was a sport that obviously I'm highly partial towards playing it. I think it's fantastic. Our players think it's fantastic. And the growing participation rates indicate that it's a highly sticky sport, especially in a world where we're seeing declined participation across team sports categories due to esports, technology, you name it. And so the trends that we've seen over the last decade for our sport in particular indicate that it has Olympic potential with the World Lacrosse with World Lacrosse Now, which was recently rebranded for similar challenges that Gretchen had mentioned previously. It was the Federation of International Lacrosse. Just last year, we were given provisional recognition by the IOC to potentially take those steps to being a participatory sport in 2028 in LA. And we have a great team that's based out here for World Lacrosse that is promoting, and we're working in partnership with as the PLL to achieve that. So you have growth at the participation level in North America. You have the fastest growing inclusive sport at the NCAA level for men's and women's Division I teams, popping up faster than any other team sport in North America, and then over 60 countries participating. And this has all happened kind of behind the scenes, given the lack of hand raises even in here, and it's sometimes common, which is okay. Although by a show of hands, I'd like to ask if raise your hand, and I won't get angry, if you've never heard of lacrosse, which is great. I don't see a hand. But I'll say when I first started playing professionally 10 years ago, a lot of people, when I'd hop on my plane to go compete over a weekend, would say, hey, what's that stick with that netting in it? And they hadn't heard about it. So we get really granular around the nomenclature around the sport, the recognition of the sport. That's been really key for us. And what I often talk about, and I'll stop hogging the mic, is what we did with the PLL. And we certainly changed some elements of a traditional team sports league and the way it's consumed in North America and even in overseas, away from a city-based franchise model into true single entity.
Well, Paul, let's talk about that. Real quickly. What was so the arc of the sport has developed enough that, and tell me where I'm wrong, I'm not putting words in your mouth, where you felt that the Premier Lacrosse League was a viable investment and people would want to be attracted to that? Why now?
Well, not every sport achieves success at the professional level, and that's okay. We believe that lacrosse can. So sports typically start as bottom-up sports. So you have a heavy participation base, and then it reaches high school, college, and then if there is a viable pro product, then you have that bottom-up mentality. And then what we've seen, starting with Major League Baseball a century ago, and then the NFL, and then the NBA, especially during the David Stern era, is that it takes intention and professional sports property and great owners and sophistication around media and stadium inventory and so on to flip that model to a top-down. If you can flip it to top-down where attention and revenue starts at the professional level, it doesn't mean that participation diminishes. So if you follow my kind of wacky design narrative here, it just means that you can funnel more opportunities. So when the NFL reached ubiquity, when the NBA reached ubiquity, when, what I was going to mention earlier, the UFC professionalized and commercialized MMA, then that can lead to so much more growth at the youth level, high school, into college, and then even internationally. That's why we want to work in concert with the USOC, with our national governing body, US Lacrosse, with World Lacrosse, because we think to achieve that level of professional and commercial viability, it requires the sports property at the professional level to work in concert with the international bodies. So, didn't answer your question though on tour-based. We think that at a high level, and I could talk a while about it, building a new sports league in a modern era in 2018 and launching in 2019, we had so many other tools at our disposal and new sports consumer trends and insights that didn't exist in the early 1900s when Major League Baseball dropped a park next in a city where people traditionally were born, raised, and stayed. You had local print turned local radio, turned local television. So you were very much focused on your local team. That has all changed when you add regional, national television, instant replay, on demand, now OTT, and you look at the consumer trends of millennials and Gen Zs, and then the advent of social media, the proliferation of player brands. People are now consuming sports differently because they can watch Cristiano Ronaldo live overseas from their device. I'm now on the West Coast. I grew up on the East Coast. I could watch LeBron play and Steph Curry play whenever I wanted. That never existed. So we looked at all of these new tools and technologies when we were building, and also understanding objectively when lacrosse is still in its nascent stage of participation and fan affinity, we can change a little bit while garnering new opportunity with corporate partners and someone like NBC. So a challenge in a city-based model out of the gates. If your owner, fine owners, but if your owners don't own their venues, then you're in a bit of a rat race to find a game time that matches on the season schedule with the other opponents in the league. Once you find that schedule, then you go to your networks and you say, hey, can we capture some of your inventory on Thursday night, hypothetically, at 7:30, that's usually already booked up. So we thought, hey, going tour-based, we can capitalize on a few trends. One, all those that I had mentioned. Two, the advent of MLS over the last decade has led to these $250 million to $1 billion venues that have opened up seating 25,000 people in state-of-the-art. Let's look at those as opportunities to anchor in over a course of a weekend because they only have 30 or so games and are looking to fill others. So that opportunity. And then thirdly, if we can bring all 6 of our teams, which are a 6-team league right now, into that one market, kind of akin to NASCAR or PGA Tour or UFC, then we can solve for a couple of things. We have access to the venue and we can iterate on all the game times so they can be distributed on broadcast television without any type of friction. We can also create a more surrounding experience for fans where they can access all the best players in the world in one site, and for brands. So brands don't have to say, okay, I have to spend at the league level, at the team level, I have to figure out from an experiential marketing standpoint which games we want to be at. They know when they come, they're getting a premium venue, they're getting access to all the best players in the world, all the fans in one market, and a really cool broadcast experience that we've innovated in partnership with NBC on. So this tour-based model it is different, and we've had to spend a lot of time educating our fans and our audience and our corporate partners on it, but it makes a ton of sense in 2019. We kept the same core competencies of a team sports league, where we have a full regular season slate of games that lead to playoffs and a championship. We have a trading system, a waiver wire, and all that makes sense. The only difference is our teams aren't city-based. We do think that city affinity is important, and as we continue to hack attention and and bring on additional revenue streams in this modern era that we then look at expansion in the city-based model in a half a decade or so.
Feel that could happen in the future.
Absolutely.
Let's bring in Nick Street, who's been sitting over here patiently. Nick's from, now, I asked about skateboarding and surfing, but how many of you are aware of Vans as a brand? Of course you all are. I happen to have a pair, thanks to the great people at Vans, that's what I'm wearing today. But Nick, tell us about, well, first of all, let's show the video that we have from Vans, and then I'm gonna ask Nick to talk about what Vans' involvement in skateboarding and surfing and the sports that they love and brand.
So there's this guy, this guy, and this guy decides to make a better deck shoe, this better deck shoe, with a rubber sole that looked like waffles and stuck like syrup, and a custom upper made of whatever fabric you were feeling. And surfers dug that. So pretty soon these shoes started popping up all along the coastline, including a little surf shop in Santa Monica, where some hood rat kids had started surfing asphalt, carving banks, hijacking pools, and reinventing skateboarding in the process. So by the time they showed up to Del Mar in matching blue 44s, these shoes were as essential as the boards themselves. Then the guys were like, hey, can you make them like this? So we did, which led to this shoe, which led to this shoe, which led to a stripe down the side, and kids sketching up the uppers. Then this guy took over and got these shoes traveling, off the wall and into the ruckus, sticking to the floor and bouncing around pits before ending up in Hollywood and blowing up in a movie the lawyers say we can't mention. Whatever, you know the one. From there we took it international, while uniting kids from Sao Paulo to Shanghai under a checkerboard flag and bringing the underground to the main stage one show at a time, creating the House of Vans to give a nation of millions a place to come up, just like those that came before them. So while groupies line up to chase the next fad, we'll keep rocking our Vans, just like we have for the last 50 years, same as it ever was, only sometimes a little different. This is our story, and we're sticking to it, because we're the Van Dorn Rubber Company, but you can call us Vans.
So Nick, what do you do at Vans? And why are you here sitting on an emerging sports panel?
It's a good question. I have no medals and no accolades.
I don't see, do you guys make cleats, by the way? Or CrossFit shoes?
No, we don't.
What
you just saw was our brand campaign that we ran actually 3 years ago when we turned 50. We wanted to show this because really this is the story of Vans. Glad to see that all of you put your hand up. I'm sure you all have your own story. As a brand, our purpose is to inspire and enable creative self-expression. And we've really been doing that for the last 53 years. I think what's important to understand with us is that as a brand, we didn't decide to support skateboarding and surfing. We were adopted by skateboarders. We were adopted at a time when skateboarding wasn't a known sport, and we had someone called Tony Alva walk into the store at the time, and he was actually wearing out one of the shoes more than the other shoes, so we actually sold him a single pair of shoes. That's really how our relationship with skateboarding started, and 53 years later, we continue to support the sport. When I say sport, skateboarding is many things. It's business. For us, really, it's a lifestyle and it's a way of thinking, and that's really inherent to who we are as a brand. It's very much part of our DNA. We listen to our athletes. They come to the office every day. They create the product with us, and skateboarding as a sport or as a culture really permeates more than just those that are actually actively participating. It goes into popular culture, it influences fashion, etc. So that's really our affinity and sort of a bit of our history with skateboarding. And we, over this 53 years, really have made it our mission to continue to support that community.
So are you supporting athletes, events, both?
We do both.
Or do you own your own events? Do You create?
We also create our own events. So we do a little bit of everything. Our relationship with our athletes, that was Tony Alva, that was depicted in the brand campaign here. Really, that's where it started, and it's never stopped. So we obviously have an athlete program. We actually have multiple pillars as part of the brand: action sports, music, street culture. Action sports in particular has surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, and BMX in it. And so when we say action sports, those are really the sports that we're focused on. Those are really the original action sports, and we've really been there very much from the beginning of the origin of those. We do also create our own events. Most recently, we created the Events Park Series in 2016 as really a global platform for park terrain skateboarding. It's one of the two disciplines on how skateboarding is going to show up in the Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. And we're really proud of what we've achieved over those years and what we've come to. It's a global tour. Today, we crown a world champion every year. Both men and women. We have gender parity as far as pay is concerned, which we introduced, and we're excited for how quickly the sport is growing and the participation in it as well.
When you say gender equity in pay, is that prize money?
Prize money.
But what kind of prize money would a potential athlete, or were you talking about skateboarding right now? Or
skateboarding in particular, so that's a $20,000 for the first place.
First place. So what would be the total prize money?
So over the course of the season of the year, we're giving away just under $1 million. And
gender
yes.
equity.
Yeah. So the other part of this is we also build, where we try to build legacy parks wherever we go. That's unfortunately not always possible. It's a little bit difficult sometimes to work with the council and get permanent concrete parks built. But this year alone, we're going to leave 3 legacy parks behind in Paris, in Montreal, and in Utah, Salt Lake City.
So what would a top skateboarder make for either both endorsements and prize money? What would be a top athlete kind of income?
I think it depends on what you define as top and sort of where you are
I'll let you define it.
in the world of skateboarding,
yeah.
right? I mean, obviously there's endorsement deals. There is, if you are on the competitive side of skateboarding, there's the prize money you can win. A lot of our athletes, being the creators that they are, run their own companies. They run their own board brands. They're obviously endorsed by other brands as well. So it would be hard for me to sort of put a price tag on what someone can make. But it spans from people like Tony Hawk that you all know, all the way down to up and coming young skateboarders female skateboarders, for example, coming in out of Asia that we're actually paving a career path for.
Fantastic. Gretchen, what about what you're doing? Is there a professional aspect to it that you can tell us about?
Sure, yeah. So if you're looking at prize money at the CrossFit Games, which obviously offers much more prize money than we do at our World Championships, but for the CrossFit Games, they're offering $300,000 to the first place finisher, and that is equal, always has been, for males and females. They've always won the same prize money. That's individuals. Teams win a little less. I think they're maybe in the $100,000 range. And there are smaller, other.
Is that male and female combined?
Yeah, the teams are teams of 4.
Is it equitable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 men, 2 women on the
All right.
teams. Yep. But yeah, I think we're really lucky, I guess. From the beginning, CrossFit Inc. really set the standard of gender equity. Always equal prize money to the men and women, equal coverage, equal TV time, even in their social media, all of that. Arguably, the women are maybe bigger stars than the men, and they really are kind of superstars in this community. But yeah, the top athletes can make a decent living competing, but that is the very top echelon and a very small percentage of the athletes.
Paul, you've been a little disruptive in the lacrosse market. Tell us about, I mean, you definitely have embraced the professional model. Can you tell us about that? And frankly, I'll ask you right up front, who's your competition?
So at the league level, and so I'll speak quickly to the scope of non-core sports, as Nick would mention, even in action sports, and I kind of took on that strategy when I was first playing in our competitors league, which is Major League Lacrosse, a group that's been around for 18 years. I had played in that league for 10 years, and a lot of our 160 plus players now played in MLL, and we left to build PLL, which I'll get to. But yeah, I mean, the sports wages can, I think, feel a bit inflated because we see Major League Baseball contract signings and the NBA and the NFL, and a lot of the economics behind that are deserving given the revenue streams that are going into these ownership groups and what the PAs are fighting for and so on. But in lacrosse, very much so, like action sports, you take an amalgam of your on-field wage with achievable sponsorship revenue. A lot of guys have their own camp clinic business. Some of them might start their own state company too, similar to starting a board company. And you kind of patch it together as an athlete entrepreneur, a modern athlete entrepreneur. So we look to solve that, and I'll give a specific example. The average wage for Major League Lacrosse previously over the course of a 14-game season was $8,000, and then expenses were paid for in travel and so on. So what we did out of the gates on average is quadruple that on-field wage. We offered health insurance to all of our players because given my former strategy, and I would assume so with a lot of the action sports athletes, is that you come out of your pocket for your own health care. And that can be tricky, even if you're running your own camp and clinic business. There's insurance involved and plenty of risk of playing lacrosse or teaching lacrosse to a group of kids on a summer day. The ricochets off the pipes and the contact of the sport. So there's a lot of liability that I think a lot of my peers maybe weren't aware of or positioned well to take on. And then the last one, which we've picked up a lot of traction on, at least with financial outlets, is all of our players have stock options in the business. So we're a true single entity. And the way that my co-founder and older brother Mike and I had thought about it, he's the CEO, was that, okay, if we were building a company, and we've been involved in doing so on a number of different, across a number of different industries, and we have our own small venture investment group and advisory group, is let's capitalize this thing with the right strategic investors first, and we've done so. Our lead investors are Joe Tsai, who's co-founder of Alibaba, owner of Brooklyn Nets, CAA, Churning Group, Rain Ventures, so groups that have given us extended capital to carry on a 10-year project, but also understand and have existing relationships in sports. So you have your investors that capitalize the table, you have your founders and executive team, and then you have your employee section that's often carved out if you're an early stage Silicon Valley company, where you offer stock options to your employees, and we view our players that way. As we're seeing more and more athletes also invest in something like equity in startups in lieu of cash. But knowing that these guys, in many cases girls in other leagues, are putting their health at risk and are branding and pushing the league forward for their ownership groups and for the league owners. So we looked at all of the stories what we were being told previously as, hey, we're no different than the NFL players of the 50s. And then you talk to the NFL players of the 50s, and there's certainly a delta between where they feel like they were taken care of versus the groundwork they laid for the current players. And so we felt like solving that with offering them stock options was something that was worthwhile, and they were really excited about it.
I think there's a lot of people that want to make a career out of all three of these areas that it's been a challenge.
Yeah, table stakes in sports is that you look at it, you're a media marketing company, and whether it's a millennial that's watching, that's never played the game, or whether it's a young kid picking up the game and has aspirations to play at the pro level, they need to see the professionals being duly compensated for what they do. They need to know that these people are full-time. If you see a part-time sport, there's going to be a seed of thought around negativity or what could be, what if. And I think that's what the core sports have baked in and have for a while. It wasn't always the case back in the day, and And so we wanted to expedite to that level, and that's why we specifically carved out that allocated budget to raise money, as we needed our guys to be full-time.
Let's transition a little bit to sport governance or governing bodies. I mean, we have, again, different perspectives, different sports. Nick, I want to start with you because we've talked a little bit about this in your brand, obviously, that you're representing athletes and the events you produce. So, coming into the first Olympic Games that will have skateboarding, how has that made the sport evolve and potentially brand or a brand like Vans with it? I mean, what has changed now that you're part of a governing body, and how did that kind of give the audience a little bit about the flavor of what's taken place to bring the Olympic Games to fruition in that sport?
Well, firstly, we're not a governing body, right?
No,
we have an event platform that we've created. It hasn't changed anything yet necessarily. It is starting to increase the awareness around the sport for sure. Both skateboarding and surfing is obviously much talked about in the media. It hasn't yet. I think the jury is still out on what it's actually going to do for the sports. The closest sport that we have that has paved the way is snowboarding, which is really the first sport that went live with the Olympics as far as the halfpipe is concerned, and now slopestyle, which is sort of the two versions where really the creativity comes in. There's also obviously the race version of that. So it will be interesting to see what impact it has on the sport. As a global brand, we're very excited that the sport is going to be seen all around the world. We have a growing business in Asia, and having lived there for 3 years of my life, the way that skateboarding is being adopted in the youth culture, being adopted just as a sport, but also as a form to creatively express yourself is really phenomenal, and it's growing exponentially. So in a country like China, that has probably been more focused on traditional sports, now that there is a heightened awareness and also an opportunity, I think is going to mean a lot. And I think overall it will be interesting to see how skateboarding is going to progress through the years. The way that it's going to show up in the Olympics is still in a fairly minimal way, right? So it's not in comparison to the established sports, 20 men, 20 women.
Well, how will it show up?
That's how it's two disciplines.
Right.
The street version, which is more stairs and rails, and then the park terrain version, which is more of a transition based course. That's basically the two disciplines on how that will show up, but it's not the full representation of all of the talent that's going to be out there. What we've been excited about is to see talent come through the open path, because our competition is open, anyone can actually join. For our competitors to come through the open path and actually take first place. Last year in Brazil, for example, the women's first spot was taken by a previously really relatively unknown female. So that's really exciting to see, and I think really shows what the opportunity is for the sport.
Have there been some changes in the rules to be a part of the Olympics with skateboarding, or rules that were never in place before that you've had to incorporate into?
So, I mean, when you set up a championship tour, you obviously have to inherently set some rules up. I think it's important to understand that, you know, skateboarding is an evolving platform, right? It's something you do to express yourself creatively. At a competitive level, you have to put some guardrails around that. We really did that with the athletes in mind and taking the athletes' feedback into mind. We also changed the course slightly every time we build one, so it's not the same. And we've had to put some parameters around that. And again, we're excited that the way that the sport is going to show up in that particular discipline is going to be similar on how you're going to see it in the Olympics. Not exactly the same, but similar.
Gretchen, you are a governing body. What is, for those that may not know, and I'm not sure I know the current path, what is the path for CrossFit or International Functional Fitness to get to the Olympic Games? What do you have to do to get in?
Sure. So obviously you have to have the governing body, which has to be a nonprofit organization, independent. And then I kind of think of it as 3 steps. So the first one is you have to get recognized by the Global Association of International Sports Federations, or GAIF. And once you're a member of GAIF, then you can try to become a member of the IOC. And once you're a member of the IOC, then you can petition to be on the Olympic program. So we're kind of at that first step. Our application to GAIF has been in since November. There's not a real timeline on it, so we're just kind of in that wait and see phase. But they have a whole list of requirements and different things, so a lot of it is kind of checking boxes and making sure we're doing the right things in terms of good governance and running our events and having integrity, making sure there are rules and standards, and that we're really trying to put the athletes at the forefront of the whole thing.
Paul, that's a great answer. Paul, we talked a little bit in the back about your involvement with the governing bodies. Tell us about what is the role, what is the path to the Olympics, and how are you involved and the PLL with potentially getting to the Olympic Games and hopefully here in the LAFC Stadium where your All-Star Game is going to be this coming month. By the way, I think you all know that there's tickets.
Everyone has tickets.
That will be announced. And by the way, Gretchen, also tell them about the tickets that you've left that were for your championships.
Yes, we have tickets to our World Championships. It's a little farther trip than the All-Star Game. Our World is over in Malmö, Sweden, but we have tickets out there for you as well if you're interested.
Airfare is included.
Both are great venues.
I'm going to tout some of our events.
Right,
we have the US Open of Surfing coming up at Huntington Beach. You do not need a ticket, it's free. So all of our events are free, so please come and join us.
Well, they're all free if you just think of it. So, Paul, when is the All-Star Game?
July 21st.
That's right down the street at the LAFC Stadium. So talk about the path to the Olympics and why is that important to you if it is?
It's very important. We try to challenge ourselves as operators to obviously be business conscious and make sure you're doing the right things for the company. I haven't seen a professional property not partner with a governing body and as a result benefit. The two should align. I think that's really critical. But if you look at in-game challenges to get into the Olympics, it's highly competitive for team and individual sports. But the benefit of being in the Olympics, which I think is the blue chip property internationally, when you talk about sports, is can be very lucrative. For your players first, even if there is a disconnect to the league and the Olympic, talking about the same sport. Athletes getting that international exposure on the Olympic stage can help them economically, can help them from an awareness perspective, which then in turn, if you're a property, rather than being jealous, you get that athlete back into your league in the regular run of play, which as a league, you're annual in the Olympics are every 4 years. So if we really zoom out and step away from our partiality of potentially other sports properties not working in concert or fighting over revenue between corporate partners that are with Olympics exclusively versus the league, that I do believe it's a rising tide lifting all boats. Now, Olympics, 500 participants plus 10,000 is the cap. So if you're a team sport, you're against a little bit more odds than individual sport. They can, bring in fewer than 100 people to participate in one of the 310 events that go off. So we're up against those odds, which means we should iterate a little bit. Basketball is great because it's 5-on-5. Lacrosse is 10-on-10 right now. So I know we're working and experimenting with World Lacrosse and US Lacrosse around making a hybrid version of our sport at the Olympic level. I think that's great. Because again, having lacrosse at the Olympic level can continue to increase.
So you modify the sport to a little bit.
We modified our game. We shortened the field. It's considered the PSA in lacrosse for the last
3-4 decades, it's been the fastest sport on 2 feet. But if you watch the game on broadcast, not our game, but if you watch the game previously on broadcast, it seems rather slow. You play on a 110-yard field and there's a lot of transition, smaller nets, and so we cut out some of that distance in the middle of the field. We made the field shorter. We put a 2-point arc. You think about sports, people like to stare at home runs or the prospect of a home run in baseball, a dunk in basketball, all of these like big moments that you look for, a touchdown in football, Hail Mary, and so we created a 2-point arc. The basketball did that a while ago, and a lot of the purists were resistant against it. Basketball used to also tip off after every point. So we're trying to figure out how to speed up the game, how to implement new rules, and it's very much down the same path that I think we'll continue to pursue with the IOC. We also worked with NBC.
I've been given we're down to probably about 8 minutes, I'm guessing, Mr. Perlman. So I'd like to open it up to questions. Any questions that you might have for any of the panelists or all 3 of the panelists? We'd love to have those come forward.
55 minutes of sometimes an hour and a half, 2-hour broadcast, trying to extend that watch time.
State your name, please, and where you're from.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Colin Weston. I'm with Reviver Sport Entertainment from Vancouver. Paul, question for you. Well, we do have one for Nick too. If you're 2 for 1 here. We're involved, and you're inspiring, Paul, for us because we are involved in creating a new competitive gameplay format in golf, where we're also compressing down the gameplay. Wanted to ask you, as far as inspiration from other sports, we've looked at rugby, with rugby sevens, and cricket, 5-day, down to now when they have the Indian Premier League, which is 2020, which is 500 million fans and very lucrative. Just wanted to ask you, are you inspired by any other sports? Do you look outside of lacrosse to get inspiration for what you're doing?
No doubt, no doubt. Quick shout out, Canada's national team sport is lacrosse.
It's not hockey. No, it's not.
But absolutely, we pulled a ton of inspiration from other sports, and we also worked with NBC as our network partner. And I'll reference Adam Silver, who's been helpful in this business as well. And they're applying new concepts and deploying them to the marketplace where you can pay $1 to watch the final 2 minutes. And he realizes that the average NBA viewer is watching 55 minutes of sometimes an hour and a half, 2-hour broadcast, trying to extend that watch time. YouTube algorithms now about watch time, while our attention span continues to shrink because of social media. But he says the holy grail is you have to have the long-form broadcast. You have to have the full game to keep the integrity of it, and then the social snacks is what he calls it, go out and garner impressions and viewership that brands love. But for us, lacrosse can be a 2.5-hour game. So what we did was looked at 10 years of data from the time it takes to get from a goal to a face-off, average penalties in a game, pre-game, post-game segments we want to include. If we don't have that, the broadcast isn't as great. You can't tell stories of the players, which is what ultimately matters. Halftime, reviews, and so on. So we actually shrunk our quarters down. Our broadcast on the main network is 2 hours, but the gameplay is about 90 minutes. So we have a pre-game, post-game, halftime. We've done a ton of other things from an innovation standpoint. One of them is that we took the same technology that a quarterback uses. It's non-disclosed in a game where he communicates with his offensive coordinator on play calls. We took that tech, and instead of connecting it to the offensive coordinator, we connected it to the broadcast booth. So after Connor Fields is an attackman for Chaos Lacrosse Club scores a goal, Ryan Boyle and Brendan Burke will go into his helmet as we go into that 25-second roll, set up the face-off, and ask Connor Fields live on the broadcast how he got his hands free to score. And that's an example of what we're doing, being true single entity, having all of our players bought in, their stock option holders, and we can do things differently to capture that attention and expand that watch time. But absolutely, you look at all of these sports regularly and seeing what they're doing, and some of the benefits of having Rangers, for example, as an investor, gets close to some of these updated business models with golf and others. Can give us key insights.
Love to chat with you afterwards if you're around for a few minutes.
You had a question for Nick as well?
I did. One of the other hats we wear, well, with golf, we are getting off the golf course, and one of the other hats we wear is also with surfing and developing surf parks. Nick, wanted to pick your brain a bit, what you think of getting off the ocean and the potential there. I know Kelly Slater, of course, has the artificial wave he's developed, but just even for the public, your thoughts on the expansion to grow surfing and bands involved with that, with surf parks and even beyond that.
Personally, I'm from Germany, landlocked. If there would have been a surf park when I grew up, I would have loved it. So, you know, I think if it brings accessibility to the sport and introduces more people to it, then I think as hopefully the technology continues to evolve, there's a few different models out there. Seeing them in, you know, hotels, there's a lot of malls that are empty, that can be repurposed. I think that would be a great idea. Is the ocean going to go away? You know, no. I think, again, there's multiple facets to the sport, but I think in order to grow participation and as a tool to bring surfing to places where it's not accessible, I think it's great. And yeah, let's hope that technology continues to evolve and we still see more of them at an affordable rate.
We're working on it.
I'm seeing the LA River as a surf park at some point. One more question. Do we have another question? Up front here, do we have a mic that we can, all the way up at the front, please? And give us your name, where you're from. Where?
My name is Lauren Okimura. I come from USA Volleyball, so I come from the NGB world. But my question for you is one that I faced with my emerging sport in beach volleyball years ago. Is that arguably, you know, listen to all of you talk about the start of your emerging sports, and arguably there has already been a culture established, you know, lifestyle, brand, and such. And in making that jump to the Olympic world, obviously there are new parameters, whether it's from commercialization, regulation. How are you each addressing the, you know, preserving the culture of where your sports began versus trying to fit it into the box that is the Olympic program? And I'm right there with you, so I empathize, but I'm just curious as to what your experience has been.
Yes, I can start, I guess. I think one of the things that's really important for us as we kind of started this journey was that we really wanted independence as a sports governing body, right? If you look at a lot of some of these new emerging sports, a lot of times they will fall under, or you know, an existing sport will kind of, I don't want to say gobble them up, but in a way they'll come under them. And we really feel strongly that our sport has its own culture, it should be independent, it doesn't belong under, you know, any of the other ones, and we really want to, it's our goal to try to maintain that independence, because I think, you know, everyone involved in our organization did or does the sport at some level, and we understand the culture. So that's really important. The other thing that I think is really unique, at least about functional fitness, and so CrossFit really, when it started, there really were no rules, and they really, like, they still to this day, CrossFit Inc. does not have, you know, an established set of, all right, here's standards, it's written out of how you judge the movements. So that was something new that we had to create as a governing body. So we have had to put some standardization on it, but because there literally was nothing. So we have not actually received any pushback yet on that, I think, because it helps with the integrity of the judging and the way the sport works. People kind of accepted that. So I think we've been fortunate that we have been able to maintain the culture so far and haven't had to regulate things so much that we've had any pushback. But we do, you know, I think the independent, being an independent governing body, that's kind of our big priority moving forward to try to maintain that culture.
So we need to wrap things up. Nick, do you want to address that?
I just think you bring up a really good point. Culture is important. It's what drives skateboarding. It's what drives surfing. These are sports that weren't governed, regulated by adults or federations in the past. These are sports that inherently come out of youth culture and are driven by youth culture. Our aim is to protect that culture and to continue to pave the way for generations to come. We decided not to be sanctioned as part of the Olympics. So because we made that decision to not compromise that much and to be able to stay independent to do what we needed to do. But we're supporting skateboarding in the Olympics, and we hope it's all going to go well, and we're definitely looking forward to it growing, and when it comes to LA, for it to be a fully fledged sport.
And with that, we're going to have to draw it to a close so we can bring, I want to hear it for Paul, Gretchen, and Nick, our great band. Thank you so much.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, so if you can be back by 10:30. And Nick, Gretchen, and Paul, thank you very much. So just, I know you're just want to comment on how important it is for these new sports. Last Summer Olympics we had golf, trying to get tennis in, beach volleyball, 40 years for basketball. So everybody's support coming in and trying to do a great job. See you in about 10.